We're now joined in studio, as I said earlier on, by our specialist sports researcher, Janet Whitton. Janet, a very good afternoon to you, and thank you so much for your time. Of course, we're monitoring those elections in Greece. They haven't started just yet, but let's look at what's at stake. So there's 7 candidates, and of course, one of them very excitingly in the running is Kirsty Coventry, who's the only female, and of course, from South Africa, from Africa, in fact, the African continent in Zimbabwe. These elections have been described as unpredictable, and so there's a lot of stake. But just take us through what you know so far.
There is a lot at stake. The elections are supposed to start around about now at 4 o'clock.
Yeah.
And I think it could take quite a long time. As you mentioned, it's very close. It's been very difficult to actually pick a likely winner in the voting this afternoon. And what happens is they vote. There are 103 members of the IOC that vote in the session. The person who wins has to get 50%. And if they don't get 50% in the first round, the person who came last drops out, they vote again, and it's expected that it's going to go through quite a few rounds. As you also mentioned, Kirsty Coventry is one of the favourites, along with Juan Antonio Samaranch Jr., whose father is a previous IOC president, and Lord Sebastian Coe, who is the athletics chief, who's been very high profile, particularly to South Africans because of his involvement in the Caster Semenya saga.
Yeah.
The 3 of them, I would be very surprised if they're not the last 3 standing. Kirsty Coventry is a very interesting candidate. She probably is the least experienced, in a sense, at that high IOC level in terms of sport. But she also carries the cachet of the fact that she's from Africa, and that is significant because the IOC has very much been dominated by Europe for a very long time. So that in a way, I suppose, counts against Lord Coe and the other European candidates, and there are a few of them. And then Samaranch has got lots of experience at this level. He's got multiple fancy business degrees. He's certainly qualified to do the job. He's been involved for a long time. But I think that in the sense of where the Olympic movement needs to kind of push itself into the 21st century, which it's kind of struggled a little bit to do, Samaranch might be seen as being a step back because of his connections to his father. So I think Kirsty Coventry has a very good chance.
I mean, I want to just stay with her. In fact, I mean, some reports indicating that the current IOC president, Thomas Bach, is favored towards her because of his own policies in as far as gender equality is concerned. How significant a policy is that when you look at the makeup of the IOC and just some of the challenges and struggles that it's had?
The IOC, the broad membership, the 109 members who will be voting today, is actually a very kind of good cross-section of gender, of race, of nations, of continents, of sports. So if you look at it from that point of view, it is very broad. But at this very top level, no woman has ever really been even a viable candidate before. So I think it would be very significant if Kirsty Coventry managed to get that job. And I think the fact that she's from Africa, don't underestimate how important that actually is. Africa is at the growth of everything. It's not for such a long time. Africa at the Olympic, at that kind of senior level, was seen as being competitive in athletics and not much else. That is changing, and it's changing very fast. So I think having somebody from Africa who understands that kind of how important grassroots development is, because Kirsty Coventry understands that certainly better than anybody else who's standing today. I think it's very important. So both her gender and where she comes from are significant.
Yeah, and I mean, we understand, of course, the voting is going to happen within this hour, but a little bit later on. And as you said, there's a number of stages to go there. And we'll bring you back, of course, as soon as that begins, Janet. But just on the issues and the challenges a new leader coming in, outside, of course, of what we've just been discussing in terms of gender equality, what other challenges are there, do you think, that will probably be at the forefront of a new leader coming in and basically sweeping clean, as it were?
I think there are probably two main issues. The first issue, which has been in the news recently, is the issue of gender.
Yeah.
Oddly enough, Kirsty Coventry's views on this are actually very similar. All 7 candidates have a very similar view. Possibly Lord Sebastian Coe is a little bit more vociferous than the others. All of them have talked about protecting women's sports.
Yeah.
And of course, we're talking about the issue of transgender people taking part in women's sport, whether they should be allowed or not. At this stage, the IOC gives that authority to the individual sporting federations. So if the International Gymnastics Federation allows transgender, then those transgender athletes are allowed to take part in the Olympics. If, like athletics, they don't, then those athletes are not allowed to take part. Yeah. And that's kind of where all of them stay, but they've all been fairly strong in their words about protecting women and women's sport for women only.
Yeah.
And then the other issue is geopolitics. Because of where the world is at the moment. We're sitting in a situation where Russia, for example, has been on the outskirts of the Olympic movement for a long time because of doping, but now there's a very complicated political issue to take into consideration here. Also, the IOC has always been sort of trying very careful to not step on too many toes. They want to be as inclusive as possible. So they don't want to make big political statements. Again, Sebastian Coe is probably the one who's made the biggest political statement of all. He's been very pro-Ukraine, anti-Russia in this situation recently. So that would be an interesting development if he took the IOC in that direction as well.
Okay, hold those thoughts, Janet. We'll come back to you, of course, a little bit later on when those elections come, the process, in fact, does begin in Greece. Of course, Janet Whitton is a specialist sporting researcher right here at the SABC. We'll continue that conversation a little bit later on. And of course, we're talking about the 144th International Olympic Committee session that's currently underway in Greece.